Joe Reilly, a real leader here on the Space Coast, a business leader who's developed his company into a national leader, doing business all across the country. He wants to help you here on the Space Coast. Well, it takes a certain type of person to be an entrepreneur and to really build their own business. And we're sitting now with Joe Reilly, the president of National Drug Screening. He's built this company from the ground up and takes an immense amount of pride in what he's done. And it's a real success story, Joe. Many congratulations for an incredible year, 2021.
Thank you, Giles. It's good to be here with Space Coast Daily. And yeah, we just finished up 2021 with a great year providing drug and alcohol testing services for both employers and for individuals.
Yeah. Well, in the middle of a pandemic, National Drug Screening expands 26%. How'd you do that?
Well, unfortunately, one of the things that happens in the middle of a pandemic is more people use illicit drugs. And so more employers are interested in making sure that they're hiring drug-free employees, and we help them with that.
Yeah. I know you do an incredible amount of business nationwide, helping people and employers all over the country, but you want to help people more and more on the Space Coast for small and medium-sized businesses. Can you sort of explain, I'm a former business owner myself, really the cost benefit versus the costs of not putting a drug-free workplace in these days?
Absolutely. So, setting up a drug-free workplace is not really all that expensive. You need to have a drug-free workplace policy, and many companies already have that. So that would be like the initial startup expense. If you don't have one, we can write a drug-free workplace policy for a business, and we're talking, $300-400 to get that done. Moving forward, then you're going to be doing drug testing. You're going to do drug testing when you hire people, maybe post-accident, reasonable suspicion, and maybe random testing. So the average cost of a drug test right now, locally here on the Space Coast, Brevard County, it's about $59 for a 5-panel drug test, 10-panel drug test. Very reasonable. And, one of the biggest key factors for businesses to understand is that in Florida, state law provides that if you implement a comprehensive drug-free workplace program, the state mandates that workers' comp insurance give you a 5% discount.
That's a big savings. So, the pier, we've talked about the pier many times. We actually were kind of forced into that for our workman's comp company. Said, you need to do this because you're going to save, I think it was 6-7% back then, but it was a big savings. But they were sticklers, absolute sticklers on making sure that everyone was drug tested. But after we did it, we were so glad we did.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things about drug-free workplace programs. You can get a benefit, but in many cases, you have to do it. So sometimes workers' comp will look at a business's loss history and say, well, if you want us to write your insurance, you've got to do this, and implement a drug testing program. So sometimes they put the pressure on you, like you mentioned.
Yeah. Is it possible to pass the costs of a drug test on to the applicant?
No. So when you require an applicant to do some type of testing, and that's required to be employed there, the employer has to pay for it.
Okay. So you can't say, if you get hired, we're going to take it out of your first paycheck. That's also a no-no.
No, not for drug testing.
Yeah.
No.
But on the actual positive side, a drug-free workplace, in your experience, let's say it's a $5 million a year company in revenue. Once they implement the drug-free workplace, how much are they actually going to save in hiring costs, retention costs, and other ways?
So, if you do the 5% discount on workers' comp, that may not be a huge savings, but when you factor in turnover, because people that use drugs turn over, you factor in productivity, because people that use drugs are less productive, people being late for work, people using more health insurance, because if they're using illicit drugs, they may have more health problems. So the savings has been calculated many times to be 2, 3, 4 times more than what the drug testing cost.
Yeah. And for those employers out there who are struggling to find help, they're short cooks, they're short mechanics, they're short builders. For them to say, well, geez, if I implement this drug-free policy, I have never had that before, it's going to be even more difficult to find and keep employees. What's the answer to that?
Yeah, so there's 2 answers to that. The response is, well, if I drug test people, I won't have any employees. There's actually 3 answers. 1, you'll still have employees. Not everybody uses drugs. Okay. 2, you may want to bite the bullet because maybe you don't want people there that are using illicit drugs. They're going to be less productive. They're going to cause problems in the workplace. And one incident can cause a catastrophe. Now, the third answer is kind of new on the horizon. If they really want to eliminate marijuana, because that's kind of the biggest problem, well, they can take marijuana off the drug test panel. But why not still test for cocaine? And why not still test for heroin? Are you going to give those people a pass?
Drivers of heavy vehicles, all sorts of vehicles on the roads today, what are their requirements in order to get a CDL or something like that?
That's a great question. So those folks that are driving commercial motor vehicles with a CDL license and they're driving vehicles over 26,000 pounds, your large tractor trailers, they are required by the United States Department of Transportation to have drug testing, and they have to test for marijuana. Those are strict requirements, and that includes the owner-operator, the one single guy with one truck, it's just him, or that includes, J.B. Hunt with 90,000 truck drivers.
Yeah. We cover an incredible amount of traffic accidents on Space Coast Daily. There was one a couple of days ago up there on 95 where he flipped over his semi and then refused medical help going to the hospital in an ambulance for obviously reasons relating to his condition. What's he looking at? Should he be charged? And he has that. He's caused this incredible damage and catastrophe. What are the penalties in today's world for that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to that, and I'm not law enforcement, I'm not the DA, but on the drug testing side, there's a major accident. His employer is going to require him to go for a drug test and an alcohol test after that accident. And if he refused medical treatment, I bet he also refused the drug test. That takes him out of the driving position. He's prohibited. He goes into a prohibited status, and he has to go through a rehabilitation program to get out of the prohibited status.
What's the future of national drug screening and other testing companies? Where do you see it going 5-10 years from now? Where are we going to be with this?
Yeah. So, depending on how the laws evolve in this country, and more particularly federal law with regard to marijuana, we could potentially see marijuana drug testing go away. But we're still going to see cocaine, heroin, other illicit drugs. We're still going to see, hopefully substance abuse declines. In the last couple of years, it's increased. And with the pandemic, COVID-19, people are isolated, people are depressed, people are at home. We've seen more alcohol abuse, and we've seen more drug abuse. Now, the evolution of drug testing is one of the things that's coming on the horizon more and more is oral fluid drug testing. And that's a test that the employer can actually do themselves. They collect some saliva on what I call a sponge on a stick, and they ship it out overnight mail to the lab, and then they get a result. It's a perfect solution for a business, let's say, that operates 24/7, and they have somebody that's reasonably suspected of using, or someone who has an accident, because you're not going to find a facility at 2 o'clock in the morning to do a drug test.
You see it on the Jerry Springer show, the paternity suits, right? Do you offer the paternity testing, and how does that work?
Yeah, we have it available. We don't really market it heavily. Occasionally we get a call for that, but typically how it works is you got the mother, the father, the child. You get a sample, a saliva sample from all of them. It all goes to a lab, and then it gets matched up, and it comes back with 99% that you're the father, or 99% that you're not the father.
Okay. As far as small businesses and medium-sized businesses in the county, can you give me sort of a general idea on a time frame to set up a drug-free workplace, and the initial consult with you or one of your team members here? How does that work if I want to just find out more information and get a sort of proposal from you?
Yeah, you can call our office, or you can go on our website, www.nationaldrugscreening.com. You can fill out a contact form. You can call our office. I'm sure you can show the number on the screen. We do a quick consult. We ask some questions. We send out a proposal. The company can review it. Very low cost. Once we get it back, we set it up in 5 to 7 days. But we can do testing immediately. So if someone says, yeah, I want to do this, I want to put this program together, but I'm hiring somebody today, well, we can get them tested today. And we can provide facilities here in Brevard County on the Space Coast. We're looking for new small business, medium-sized business customers. We have facilities from Titusville to Palm Bay where we can get somebody in a local area for a drug test.
Joe Reilly, a real leader here on the Space Coast, a business leader who's developed his company into a national leader, doing business all across the country. He wants to help you here on the Space Coast. If you're a small business owner, a medium-sized business owner, give Joe a call, or Tom here, and they'll be happy to sit down with you and give you some advice. Joe, closing words from you. Congratulations again on a great year. That's a real accomplishment in this economy and going forward. What message do you have for the Space Coast?
Yeah, so the concept of a drug-free workplace is not just drug testing, first of all. Real quick, there's 5 components. There's a drug-free workplace policy. There's educating employees on the harmful effects of drugs. There's supervisor training to help supervisors recognize signs of impairment. And there's employee assistance programs. And then there's also drug testing. But the key thing to remember is that a drug testing program for an employer is a safety program. Less accidents, save money, less workers' comp claims, better productivity.
Yeah, and good for morale. For Joe Reilly, I'm Giles Malone for Space Coast Daily. If you need a drug test, any sort of testing, call the folks at National Drug Screening. They'll be happy to sit down and chat with you over the telephone. Joe, thank you so much once again, and many congratulations on this expansion.
Thank you, and it's great to be here with Space Coast Daily.
Thank you, sir.